New neighbor from hell started parking in my driveway every day without my permission and claimed it was public property. So I called the police and got HOA involved. Then things started to get much worse. My new neighbor moved in about a month ago, and ever since day one he's been parking his car in my driveway. Every single day I come home from work and there he is parked on my property like it's a public lot. I have a single car driveway, pretty standard suburban setup, and I use it for my own car, or at least I want to, but lately I haven't been able to because his car is always in the way. He has a girlfriend who also lives, or at least practically lives, with him, and she uses his driveway at their house next door. I guess they have 2 cars and only 1 driveway spot. So his brilliant solution was to help himself to mine. At first I tried to be polite and patient. I left a couple of friendly notes on his windshield explaining that this is my private driveway and asking him not to park there. I even phrased it nicely like, "Hey, neighbor, please don't park here, thanks." I figured maybe he didn't realize it was assigned to my house, even though that should be obvious. He ignored every note. The notes would disappear, but nothing changed. The very next day his car would be right back in my driveway. Over the past month I've left multiple notes and tried to catch him outside to talk, but we have opposite schedules or something. We haven't actually spoken yet. All I know is my requests were being completely blown off. It's incredibly frustrating to come home after a long day and see a stranger's car squatting in your spot. It's not like I have nowhere else to park. I can park on the street, but overnight street parking is not allowed. In my neighborhood the HOA and city have a rule which we all know about, that you can't park on the street overnight. So if I can't use my driveway, I'm basically screwed after dark. Yesterday was the final straw. I got home around 7 p.m., exhausted and just wanting to relax, and of course his car was smack in the middle of my driveway again. He'd even left it at a slight angle, making it impossible for me to even squeeze my car in next to him, not that I should have to share my own driveway. I honked a couple times, hoping maybe he'd come out and move it. Nothing. I don't have his phone number and, to be honest, I was pretty livid at that point and didn't trust myself to stay calm if I went banging on his door right then. So I ended up having to park on the street overnight, against the regulations. I figured maybe I'd get away with it just this once. Nope, woke up this morning to find a parking ticket on my windshield. Sometime in the early morning hours the city tagged my car for being on the street overnight, $50 fine for violating the parking rule. So not only did I have to trek from down the street to my house in the dark last night, but now I'm literally paying because my neighbor took my spot. I am beyond frustrated. I've tried polite notes and got nowhere. I haven't even met this guy properly and this is the first impression he's giving the neighborhood, just helping himself to other people's property. Who does that? It's not like my driveway is public property, even though maybe he thinks so. It's part of my yard on my deed and clearly belongs to my house. I've lived here a few years and never had an issue like this with the previous neighbor. This new guy is treating me like a doormat. I don't want to start a huge feud, but I also can't keep letting this slide. I work long hours and the last thing I need is to come home and find my own driveway stolen and then rack up parking tickets because of someone else's entitlement. I'm considering more drastic measures now. Maybe I'll have to get his car towed next time or involve the police or something, because I'm not shelling out more money for tickets due to his behavior. Before it comes to that, I'm going to try once a face-to-face conversation. I plan to go knock on his door when I know he's home and ask him directly to stop parking on my property. Maybe if I talk to him in person he'll realize I'm serious. If that doesn't work, I might have no choice but to escalate. I'm pretty anxious about a possible confrontation. I don't know this guy at all and, based on his actions so far, he doesn't seem to care about being a good neighbor. But I'm out of reasonable options. What would you do in my situation? I'm trying to handle this without turning it into World War III on my street, but I also refuse to be a pushover who can't use their own driveway. Any advice or insight would be appreciated, because I'm getting really frustrated and something has to change fast. To clarify a couple things people asked, yes, the driveway is definitely mine. Each house on this street has its own, and I left maybe 4 notes in total over the month. He just crumples them or something. I never got any response. Also, towing is tricky here without police involvement. I might have to call police non-emergency if it comes to that. Update 1, I took the advice of many of you and decided to talk to him face to face, since my polite notes were getting me nowhere. This morning, the day after I got that parking ticket, I waited until I saw that he was home. His car was once again planted in my driveway in broad daylight, great start. I walked over and knocked on his door, trying to stay cool. He opened the door and before I even finished saying hello and that I'm his neighbor, he got aggressive almost instantly. I told him as calmly as I could manage, that we needed to talk about him parking in my driveway. The guy immediately raised his voice, basically biting my head off. He said something along the lines of, "Why are you coming to my door? I saw your stupid notes and, FYI, your driveway is barely being used anyway." I was a little taken aback by how hostile he was right out of the gate. I tried to explain firmly that it doesn't matter how much I use it. It's my driveway, not a public parking spot. He cut me off and told me I need to learn to share. Yes, you read that right. According to him, I should be a good neighbor and share my private driveway with him because he and his girlfriend have 2 cars. I told him this isn't about sharing. It's about him trespassing on my property and blocking my access. I mentioned I got a parking ticket because I couldn't park in my own spot. He literally rolled his eyes and said that was not his problem. He kept insisting that I wasn't using the driveway most of the day, so why did I care? At this point I was pretty angry, but I was trying hard not to yell. I said, "Look, it's not public property, you can't just take it." He responded with a sneer, "Your driveway is public property. As far as I'm concerned, it's basically the same as the sidewalk." I was so stunned by the complete nonsense of that statement that I didn't even know how to reply immediately. For the record, no, my driveway is not public. It's definitely part of my lot. I think he's just telling himself that to justify being a jerk. Before I could gather myself to continue the discussion or argument, really, he essentially slammed the door in my face. He went from 0 to 100 anger-wise almost immediately. I was standing on his porch, fists clenched, just shocked that an adult neighbor could be that childish and rude. I'll admit I lost my cool at that point and shouted through the door that this isn't over and he can't just steal my driveway. Probably not my finest moment, but I was livid. I walked away before I did something stupid. I figured there's no reasoning with someone who actually says, "Learn to share," when he's talking about my own driveway. It felt like talking to a brick wall, a really arrogant, entitled brick wall. And guess what? The situation did not improve after that conversation. Later in the day I found a note stuck under the windshield wiper on my car, which I had parked on the street again temporarily. It was from Mr. Neighbor. In big, messy handwriting it said, "Your driveway is public property. Get over it. I cannot make this up." He actually put in writing his belief that my private driveway belongs to everyone. I suspect he left that note to taunt me because no sane person could truly think driveways are public. This guy either missed some basic civics lesson or he's just being a provocateur. Seeing that note honestly made my blood boil. It took a lot of self-control not to march back over and start banging on his door again. Instead I documented it. I took a photo of his lovely message in his car sitting in my driveway as evidence. So here I am, shaking my head in disbelief. What the hell do I do now? Talking calmly isn't working. He went straight to yelling and slamming doors. He's clearly not going to stop on his own. In fact, he doubled down. With that note, I'm starting to think my only option is to involve authorities or some neutral third party, because I can't reason with a person like this. A bunch of you suggested towing or calling the police. In my original post comments, I was reluctant to escalate to that level, but at this point he's basically daring me to. He's fully aware it pisses me off and he's continuing anyway, even rubbing it in my face with a note full of BS. I'm documenting everything, notes, photos, times, in case it's needed. I know this sounds like a petty neighbor war, but I feel completely justified, given he's literally taking my property for himself. Anyway, I'm going to give it one more day to see if maybe he cools off. Doubtful, and then I'm probably going to call the non-emergency police line for advice or assistance. I hate that it's come to this with someone who lives 20 feet from me, but I tried being nice and got slammed on. I tried being firm and got told my property is public. There's nowhere else to go with this except involving the folks who can actually enforce the law. I'll update again once I take that step or if by some miracle he stops before then. But I'm not holding my breath. Wish me luck. I have a feeling I'm going to need it dealing with this guy. Edit also, some asked if he's renting or owns. I'm actually not sure. If he rents I might try to find the landlord, but given his attitude I suspect he might be the owner. I'll see what the police say. Update 2, I had to get the police involved. There was really no other choice. As many of you in my own common sense suggested, I went ahead and called the police non-emergency line to report the trespassing issue. Here's how that went down. I explained to the dispatcher that my neighbor had been repeatedly parking on my private property without permission and refused to stop even after being asked. I also mentioned I had documentation, dates, the note he left, etc. They were surprisingly helpful and didn't brush it off as a petty squabble. The dispatcher confirmed that, yes, someone parking in your driveway without consent is a trespassing/parking violation on private property. They said they'd send an officer out to mediate and have the car removed if necessary. About an hour later, a patrol car, by this time my neighbor's car was still in my driveway. Of course I met the officer out front and gave him a quick rundown, basically repeating that my neighbor had been doing this for weeks and refused to stop. I showed the officer the photo of the note where the neighbor wrote, "Your driveway is public property," and the cop actually let out a small laugh like, "You gotta be kidding me." We walked over to my neighbor's house together. The officer knocked and I stood a few feet back. It took a minute, but neighbor answered. The moment he saw me standing there with a police officer, his expression just darkened. The cop started off calmly, telling him that he needed to move his vehicle off my property immediately. My neighbor instantly got defensive, saying something like, "Why are you on my doorstep? This is a civil matter." The officer told him it actually isn't, because he's trespassing on private property and I have the right to have his car towed or press charges if I wanted. The guy then tried the ridiculous argument again. I thought that driveway was basically public. It's not a big deal, it's not like I'm hurting anyone. The officer very firmly set him straight, "No, it's not public at all. It belongs to that homeowner," pointing to me, "You have zero right to park there without permission." The neighbor started sputtering about how I never use it and how this neighborhood has too few parking spots. Not true. Everyone has a driveway or even a garage. The cop wasn't having it. He said, "Even if it was completely unused, it's not yours. You need to move your car now or I'll have it towed at your expense." Neighbor was furious at this point. He tried to turn it around and accused me of causing trouble. He actually said so. "You went and snitched to the cops instead of talking to me like a man," which frankly made me want to scream because I did try to talk to him, and he literally slammed the door on me. The officer immediately shut that down and reminded him I had tried to resolve it and he didn't cooperate. The cop said basically, "Move it or lose it," to the tow truck. There was a tense stare-down moment where my neighbor looked like he was about to either explode or maybe argue more. For a second I genuinely thought he might refuse and get himself arrested. But after a deep breath, more like an angry huff, he finally said, "Fine, I'll move the damn car." He went to retrieve his keys, all the while muttering under his breath. I distinctly heard him call me a freaking rat as he walked by, and something about neighbor from hell, ironic, given he's the one creating the hellish situation. I didn't engage with his muttering, I just stood aside with the cop. He got in his car and, after giving me one deft glare through the window, moved it out of my driveway. He ended up pulling it into his own driveway behind his girlfriend's car, blocking her in. I guess that's his only option now, unless he figures out another arrangement for good measure. The officer took down his license plate and ID and made a formal incident report. The cop told him clearly, "If you park there again, you will be ticketed or towed and the homeowner can press charges for trespass." My neighbor just mumbled something indistinct and went back into his house, practically slamming his door off the hinges. After he left I spoke with the officer a bit. The cop was cool about it and said I absolutely did the right thing calling them. He said if I find the car in my driveway again, I shouldn't hesitate to call an Altoa. He also advised maybe letting our HOA, Homeowners Association, know, since they often have rules about this stuff too, and could follow up. I thanked the officer and he left. So the immediate problem is solved. His car is no longer on my property and I finally have my driveway back. But unsurprisingly, the neighbor is not happy. Even as the cop was leaving, my neighbor opened a window and yelled something like, "Hope, you're proud of yourself, you damn rat." Loud enough for half the street to hear. I chose to ignore it and not yell back. No point in escalating a shouting match with someone who clearly doesn't have basic respect. He gives off some serious anger vibes and I don't know what he might do next to get back at me for enforcing my rights. It's a bit unnerving to have someone that pissed off right next door, especially since I live alone. I'm hoping this is the end of it. He got embarrassed in front of a cop. Maybe he'll stop acting like a jerk now, but given the way he called me a rat and a terrible neighbor, I suspect he's stewing on this. I'm going to keep my guard up. I've even taken the step of installing a simple outdoor camera that covers my driveway and front yard, just in case he tries anything fishy, vandalism or whatever. I hate that. I even have to think about that, but I'd rather be safe and have evidence if he does something. For now at least I can come home and park in peace. That's a win I'll happily take. I'm not looking for a war, I just want to use my own driveway without someone else in it. Hopefully neighbor cools off over time and we can just ignore each other's existence. I'll update if anything else significant happens. Edit, a few people asked if I considered towing outright. The police route was actually faster in this case and establishes a record. If he tries it again, I will have it towed immediately. Also, yes, I informed the HOA about this incident as backup. They said they'll send him a reminder that driveways are private property and that residents must not park in other spots. He's really making a great first impression on the community. Update 3, I wish I could say the story ended there, but of course it didn't. If anything, the situation got worse. My neighbor did stop parking in my driveway after the police intervention, so that much at least worked. However, as I feared, he decided to retaliate in every petty way he could think of. It's been a few days since my last update and it's been hell dealing with this guy's antics. The very next day, after the cops made him move his car, I started noticing small but infuriating things happening around my property. First, I woke up to find a bunch of trash strewn across my front yard. It looked like someone took a kitchen garbage bag and emptied it right on my lawn. There were fast food wrappers, beer cans, random papers and even a disgusting used condom. Hell, I want you guys suffer as much as I suffered a real mess. I sighed, cleaned it up using gloves and checked my security camera footage. I had installed a camera on my front porch the day before. Thankfully, the video from about 2 a.m. showed my neighbor himself walking by my yard and flinging trash out onto my grass. He had a trash bag in hand and just tossed handfuls of garbage all over my lawn. The audacity is unreal. I saved the footage, of course. Later that same day I caught him in the act of another lovely gesture. I was in my kitchen and noticed through the window his dog wandering onto my lawn. My neighbor was standing on the sidewalk watching his dog poop on my grass. The dog finished its business and they walked away. He didn't even try to pick it up. He had to have done that on purpose, because I've seen this guy walk his dog before and he used to carry poop bags. Now, conveniently, no bag in hand, so I had dog crap on my lawn to the list of harassment. I had to go out with a shovel and deal with that, cursing under my breath the whole time. Every time I cleaned something, I swear he smirked at me from his driveway or front window. It was like having a spiteful teenager next door, except he's a grown man. I never thought I'd be dealing with a neighbor who literally litter bombs the adjacent yard out of pettiness. Then came the loud music starting. That same evening he's been blasting music on his back patio at obnoxious volumes, usually late at night. I'm not talking about him just enjoying some tunes. I mean pointing large speakers towards my house and cranking the bass. On Wednesday night he did this at around 11 p.m. I was trying to unwind and suddenly my walls were practically vibrating from the bass next door. I stepped outside and could hear it clear as day. He was in his garage with the door open, drinking beer with a couple of buddies, or maybe family, not sure, and they were all laughing loudly and shouting over the music. I could also hear them making sarcastic comments like, "Oh, hope this isn't disturbing anyone," followed by laughter clearly aimed at me. It was a weekday and I had worked. The next morning. Midnight rolls around, music still blaring. I was fuming. I didn't want to call the cops again that very night and escalate things further, so I went over to the property line and yelled across over the music, something like, "Hey, quiet down, people are trying to sleep." Predictably, I got a response along the lines of "Screw you, snitch, mind your business," followed by more laughter and even louder music. Great, I decided not to engage further that night. I put in earplugs and somehow managed to sleep, though it was pretty fitful. He finally shut it down around 1:30 am. It seemed he was doing everything short of directly damaging my property to get under my skin. Over the next couple of days this pattern repeated, trash tossed in my yard in the middle of the night, dog poop left for me to find loud music late in the evening. It was like a checklist of obnoxious neighbor behavior. I continued documenting everything. I saved videos from my security cam of him throwing trash, got him 2 more times doing it on different nights, and even one clip of him clearly encouraging his dog to poop on my lawn. He literally walked the dog over to my yard. Each time I kept notes of the music disturbances, with dates and approximate decibel levels. I used a phone app to measure from inside my house. It was insanely loud. By the 3rd night of this I did more than enough. I'm a tired working man and I can't afford to lose sleep every night because this jackass wants revenge. Plus, some of my other neighbors mentioned to me they weren't pleased with the late night music either. I ran into one neighbor from 2 houses down who asked, "Hey, is something going on with neighbor? We heard loud music until early morning." I gave the short version of the story and they expressed support and said they'd back me up if I needed to involve authorities again. Apparently, this guy's party noises were starting to annoy more than just me. The big breaking point came last night, a Thursday night. My wonderful neighbor decided to throw a full-on house party. It started around 9 p.m. with a few people hanging out in his backyard and by midnight it escalated to a raucous gathering. I'm talking loud music, shouting, drunk and yelling, and even the sound of glass bottles being broken, not sure if they were just dropping them or doing it intentionally. It was like he went from petty harassment to inviting chaos that disturbed the whole street. And this is on a weeknight when folks have work in the morning by about 12:30 a.m. I had enough. I wasn't even going to waste time knocking on his door or yelling over the fence. I'd learned that was useless with him. So I did what I had to do. I called the cops again, this time to report a noise complaint and vandalism. The broken glass sounds made me mention possible vandalism, just to get a quicker response. I wasn't the only one. I later learned at least 2 other neighbors called about the noise as well. It still took a little while for the police to show. Noise complaints aren't the highest priority and it was a busy night, I guess. Meanwhile the party kept going. At one point around 1 a.m. I heard someone from another house shout, "Keep it down." But that only made my neighbors, guests, laugh and mockingly yell back. The lack of consideration was astounding. Finally, around 1:30 to 1:45 a.m., 2 police cars rolled up. I watched from my window as officers went into his yard. As soon as the cops arrived, the music went off. Someone must have yelled cops and they scrambled. It actually got quiet for the first time all night, aside from the cops talking. I couldn't hear the entire exchange, but I could guess how it went. I did hear my neighbor's voice raised in aggression a couple times, something like "What, we're just having a good time," and the cops responding in firm tones. It looked like they ID'd a few people, probably gave a stern warning or 2. One officer came to my door after speaking to the neighbor and took a statement from me about the ongoing issues. I showed him some of the video evidence of the trash throwing and explained the history that this all started because I had to make them enforce my property rights. The cop nodded and said something like, "We've been getting multiple complaints about him. We're writing up a report tonight for the noise violation. You might want to follow up with your HOA too, if you have one. About the other stuff." I assured him I would. The party dispersed after that, not immediately, but over the next half hour. People left in cars or on foot and things finally went silent around 3 a.m. I looked outside in the morning. My street was littered with beer bottles and cans and there was indeed a broken glass bottle at the end of my driveway, luckily not on my car or anything, just in the gutter area. It wasn't just my yard, the whole cul-de-sac had debris from his party. It was a pigsty. A neighbor down the way was already out cleaning in front of their house. I grabbed a broom and cleaned the glass near my driveway because I didn't want a flat tire on top of everything. Needless to say, I was, and am completely done with this guy. The police gave him a noise violation warning, possibly a citation. Not sure if they fined him on the spot or just a warning. I'll have to find out. Importantly now there's an official record that he's disturbing the peace and harassing neighbors after cleaning up that glass. I spent this morning compiling all my evidence. I printed out timestamps and incident descriptions, saved all the video clips of him littering in the dog incidents and wrote a long email to our HOA board detailing everything that's happened. I attached the photo of his lovely note claiming my driveway is public, screenshots from the security videos, etc. I also CC the property management company that assists the HOA. Our neighborhood has rules about noise, trash and property upkeep, so he's in violation of multiple clauses of the HOA agreement and beyond rules. This is just unacceptable behavior for any neighbor. I made sure to mention that several other residents, not just me, were affected, because I know at least a couple who will vouch if needed. I hit send on that email and within a couple of hours I got a reply from the HOA president, who is frankly, an awesome, no-nonsense lady. She said the situation is entirely out of hand and that the HOA would be taking immediate action. She also mentioned that I wasn't the only one who contacted them. Apparently, a few other neighbors had lodged complaints about the loud party and the general nastiness coming from that house. One neighbor took photos of some minor property damage from last night. Someone from the party, maybe my neighbor or one of his guests, knocked over their decorative solar lights along the sidewalk and smashed them. So, yeah, multiple homes were being impacted, not just mine. Knowing the HOA was now aware and involved made me feel a lot better. Our HOA, like many, has the power to issue fines for violations and even place liens on property. If fines aren't paid, they can't evict an owner, but they can make life very expensive and inconvenient for rule breakers, and this guy was definitely breaking rules and laws. Frankly, I haven't seen my lovely neighbor today at all. It's been quiet over there since the cops busted up his party. Perhaps he's sleeping off a hangover or just laying low fine by me. I did notice, however, that his girlfriend's car was gone this morning. Maybe she went to work or maybe she wanted to distance herself from the chaos, who knows. Anyway, I expect to hear from the HOA soon about what steps they're taking. I'll update once I know the outcome of that. My hope is that between the cops and the HOA, this guy will either get his act together or face enough consequences that he has no choice but to stop this crap. I just want few notes to address questions. Yes, I gave the police copies of the security footage of him throwing trash. They now have that on file, which could count as evidence of vandalism or littering if this escalates legally. I didn't confront him directly during the retaliation because I knew it'd just turn into a screaming match or worse. Better to let the authorities handle it, as frustrating as it is to be passive in the moment. Trust me, I wanted to pour the trash back onto his lawn, but I held back. Update 4, Final. Here's the hopefully final update on the Neighbor from Hell saga, and I'm happy to report that there's a satisfying resolution. It's been about a week since the HOA and multiple neighbors got involved, and the fallout for my troublesome neighbor has been significant. Turns out this guy wasn't just making my life miserable, he had also ticked off a number of other people on the street in his short time here. The HOA acted swiftly. They called an emergency meeting over Zoom with the board and invited any affected neighbors to speak. I joined in, as did 4 other households. That alone made me feel better. This dude truly was being a menace to many. During the meeting we learned a few interesting things. My neighbor is indeed the owner of his house, well, him and his girlfriend jointly. So he's not a renter we could evict easily, but owners have to abide by HOA rules just the same. At the meeting I and others recounted the various incidents, including the used condom. Long story short, the HOA voted unanimously to fine the neighbor for multiple violations. They cited him for 1 unauthorized use of another member's property driveway. Basically a catch-all violation of community rules and just basic neighborly conduct. 2 noise violations, breaking the quiet hours rule, which in our HOA is no loud noise past 10 p.m. on weekdays, midnight on weekends, and he went way past that. 3, littering and property damage. They classified the trash dumping and dog waste and the broken lights from the party under a vandalism/property damage clause. The fine amounts were no joke. From what I gather, the HOA will send him the formal breakdown. He's looking at a few $100s in fines. At least the noise violation fine alone was $250, I think, because it was considered egregious, given police were called. The HOA also demanded that he replace the neighbor's broken pathway lights within 14 days or face additional charges, and they made it clear that if any further incidents occur the fines will multiply and they'll consider legal action through the HOA's attorney. In extreme cases an HOA can place a lien on the house for unpaid fines and even restrict community privileges. It's serious business. We were told by the board to keep reporting any new issues, but honestly I don't think my neighbor expected the entire neighborhood to clap back at him so hard. Now what about the neighbor himself? Since the night of the party and the police intervention he's been quiet, almost too quiet, but I'm not complaining. He hasn't approached me or said a word. However, I have noticed a few things. For one, I haven't seen any more trash in my yard, hallelujah. My lawn has been mercifully poop-free for a week as well. Looks like he either got the message or is too scared to continue that crap. No pun intended, knowing I have cameras and will report it. He and his girlfriend have adjusted their parking situation too. Her car is in their driveway and he's been parking his car properly on the street during allowed hours and then moving it, I assume, into his garage or a guest spot down the street overnight. Sometimes I see his car in the driveway behind hers if he's home during the day, blocking her in, like I noted before. But notably he has not dared to park in my driveway again. Thank goodness his girlfriend is still around, but I wonder what she thinks of all this. Part of me imagined she might have chewed him out after getting fined by the HOA. I did hear some shouting from their place the day the fine letter was presumably delivered sounded like a woman's voice yelling and him responding low. None of my business. But it wouldn't surprise me if there's trouble in paradise over the heap of trouble and bills he brought to their doorstep. Anyway, as of now, peace has more or less returned to my life. If my neighbor has any sense, he'll pay the fines, lay low and start being a decent neighbor, or at least an invisible one. If he continues his old behavior, he's only hurting himself. From here on I plan to basically have zero contact with him. If he steps out of line again, I won't hesitate to involve the cops or HOA as needed. But I'm really hoping it's over. It seems like he got the message now that half the block was ready to put him in his place. Thanks to everyone here who gave me advice through this whole ordeal, having objective folks way, and really helped me feel confident to take action. I'm glad I stood up for myself and didn't let him walk all over me. At the end of the day, bullies like him count on others to roll over and I didn't. And now he's dealing with a fallout. Life is too short to spend fighting with your neighbor and I'm hoping from here we can all just coexist peacefully. As of this moment he's been quiet, respectful, as much as it can be called that, and staying in his lane. That's all I ever wanted. I'm calling this a win and finally signing off from this saga. Cheers to normal boring neighbors and having my freaking driveway back. Final edit, the HOA will be monitoring him for a while. If he pays the fines and there are no further incidents, that might be the end of it. If he doesn't pay, well, that's another kind of worms for another day, but they can pursue legal means. I have a feeling he'll pay up after all this.